Hello friends, I am George Thornton. I'm an advanced Cicerone and BJCP ranked national judge. I am here today to talk about fest beers, and that makes me, I think, pretty lucky because we're going to try 3 of the Festbier styles and 1 of the Marzen style, all in the tradition, or at least for the occasion, of the Oktoberfest in Munich, which happens in the last 2 weekends of September. And we're going to get right into it. So for this BJCP category, we're really looking for beers that range between 5.8 to 6.4% alcohol. IBUs are pretty moderate, and that's 18 to 23 IBU range, so the bitterness is pretty well balanced, really more towards the malt side, allowing more of the bready, toasty aromas to come through. Yet we do expect some spicy herbal sort of hop character. And we might get hints of alcohol flavor, aroma, or warmth, but it shouldn't be too overpowerful or too overbearing. It should be something that keeps the beer pretty easy drinking and light. Now, we're going to start with the Fest beers over here first. So we have the Augustiner Brau Oktoberfest, the Oktoberfest beer from Lowenbrau, and then the Weinstefana Fest beer, and then we'll finish off with the Eyinger Festschmerzen. It sticks out quite a bit in terms of the color, as you can see. For the Fest beers, we have definitely this more straw, light gold sort of character or color. And we definitely have a lot more toastiness, breadiness, or I'm sorry, more like amber color on the Fest beer, or I'm sorry, the Marzen there. And in terms of alcohol, we're looking at 6.3, 6.1, 5.8, 5.8. So for the Augustina, that sulfur is coming up on the nose, so we could expect that with a really fresh lager especially. And I'm very happy to have these very fresh. Tasting these in Madrid, Spain, so they didn't have to travel too far, and buying them from a shop that does a good job of keeping things nice and cold. So again, that sulfur, even as I try to knock this out a little bit, still persists, but underneath it, I have a really nice raw dough and honey and this herbal and like kind of pink peppercorn and black peppercorn kind of spicy hop character. A little bit of earthiness as well. Very easy drinking. It's really just a hint of honey on the flavor or on the palate, and more of this kind of raw bread dough or kind of flour in the finish. The bitterness is low, and so really the malt is the star of the show here, but it's definitely not cloying. It finishes just off dry, and has a nice medium body. Still has this presence that feels a little bit more full, in part because of this medium plus carbonation, but very easy drinking. Now we move on to the Lowenbrau Oktoberfest beer, 6.1%. More aromatic, popping out of the glass on this one, and a bit more toasty. A bit of green apple, kind of like that vinyl acetaldehyde characteristic. Even a little solvent on there. So kind of like a black permanent marker solvent. But it still has a very nice toasty, not quite like browned toastiness, but just under that, with a nice bready undertone and honey. The alcohol warmth a little bit more than on the Augustine Helle. Augustina Oktoberfest. This to me feels like the fermentation is a little bit more rushed, a little less delicate, not quite as balanced. The bitterness is a little higher as well. This could be perceived bitterness because I think the alcohol warmth and this, there is a little bit more of a alcohol kind of spiciness to the Lowenbrau version. Overall, still very drinkable, but so far I think the Augustine Brau is drinking a little bit more clean, a little easier, more poundable, which is kind of what we're looking for on a fest beer, right? On to the Weinstefana Festbier, one of the oldest breweries in the world. Really nice honey graham cracker. I smell a little bit of like black peppery sort of spice. Excuse me, a little burp in there. Drinking some beers. And definitely this good like raw dough, raw flour. On the palate, definitely the kind of repeats, follows through with this raw flour, raw dough with a little hint of honey in there. I get a nice spicy hop characteristic that I would call kind of earth or clay, or with a hint of this kind of black pepper, and a little bit of alcohol spiciness where you have this sort of rose water or floral spicy alcohol characteristic, but very subtle, definitely not hot. Whereas the Lowenbrau was coming across a little hot for me. This one is not coming across hot for me at all. Now we move on to just a totally different style. These would all fit into the modern, BJCP would help us by categorizing these into the Festbier category and putting this into the Marzen category so that we can distinguish between them, even though this is a Festbier. This is brewed for the Oktoberfest. So here, just right away from the color, we're expecting that we're going to get a little bit more malty character and just a lot more, or a bit more of an intense toasty, bread crust characteristic. Very nice. A little hint of herbal and floral hops with a kind of in the back a little bit of the spiciness. Could be a mix of alcohol kind of spice or Saz style or noble hop spiciness. Finish is very dry still. Definitely no caramel. Definitely no lingering or cloying like sweetness. A lot of American brewers, when they see this style of beer or they imagine this beer, at least I'm assuming that they think that there must be caramel in here. And I'm not getting any hint of caramel on this. I'm getting more toasty, bready richness, not caramel, not cloying. And I think that's one of the things that American brewers tend to miss the mark on. But between all of these beers, I'd say they all drink very well. I'd say if I had to eliminate one in terms of like drinkability, the Lowenbrau would probably go first, although it was quite nice. And I would definitely, enjoy trying this at the festival in the context of the tent and everything else. And from there, then I think, if I'm just focusing on the fest beers, the Augustina and the Weinstefana are my top favorite. This just gives me a little bit more of a raw dough, which I really like, find it very refreshing. This is still giving me a little bit of that sulfur characteristic from the yeast. This could be just a sign of its freshness, honestly. So in terms of like judging this or anything, I would defend it in terms of that, because with this style, we could consider that to be a sign of its freshness, so I wouldn't knock it. It's still certainly within balance, still certainly very drinkable and very refreshing. So what's my favorite between the two? This certainly drinks very easily. So does this one. I think you get a little bit more hop character on the Weinstefana. So if you did want like a little bit more of, just a touch more of a hop flavor, I think the Weinstefana would get you there. But definitely drink both. Now in terms of overall, maybe it's not fair because it's like the one out of all of them, but I just get more kind of depth and things to sort of play with and enjoy out of this one. And so it definitely makes me want to keep going back and forth to it. They all seem to have about the same amount of residual sweetness. So in terms of like my ability to keep drinking them and not get tired of them, then they're probably about equal. Maybe the maltiness here might get a little heavy, but I'm also assuming that I'm going to be eating some sauerkraut and some bratwurst or similar. So that salt would be nice, and this would definitely bring a lot to the table for that. So I think I might give the super fresh Einger Festmarzen my number one. And the Weinstefana my number two. Very, very, very closely tied with the Augustina Brau and then the low brow is just gonna have to fall in the back. The last of fantastics. So nothing against it. Just doesn't finish or start really as like clean and easy drinking as the other ones. So that said, there's a little rundown of some classic fest beers and Marzen or Fest Marzens at least that you can try. I hope you have an opportunity to try these, especially fresh, because they are just really beautiful, delicate beers. And my name is George Thornton, Advanced Cicerone, etc. If you want to join me and geek out in person on these sort of beers, check out the website georgesgeorge.com or on Instagram or whatever, GeorgeSGeorge also. And you can learn a little bit about these Beer-Cations that I put together, where we get to go visit some of these exact breweries and learn about their process and their history, and then geek out hardcore on some really nice lunches and dinners where we're going to classic restaurants and trying these really fantastic beers with some fantastic food and in the context of the culture of where it's made. And one of my favorite things to do. So I hope you can join me one of these days in the future. That's that. Enjoy. Cheers. Ciao.